Wait, am I not streaming? No,
Oh
I
my
am
god.
streaming. What's up, everyone? It's I, Zarkon, aka Fifth Rate Duelist, and I'm here with 6 of the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists in the world. You guys asked questions for them, and I brought them all together so I can ask your questions to them. So, before we start, please sub. Check out my podcast. Every Monday it comes out. Join my Patreon where I post my podcast immediately instead of posting them like 3 months later. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Okay? Or else. Also, I'm doing a fundraiser for my cat Eva. She has a lot of medical expenses. So feel free to donate and you can be entered for the giveaways. We're going to be giving away a Starlight Rare, a Rise Heart, and some Pyramid playmats in a bit. Okay? Alright, great. So why don't we get started by everyone introducing yourselves, saying how long you've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and what are your credits, your tops. So Polly, you start.
I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know where I am. I thought I was at Home Depot. Well, I think I am current qualified World Championship competitor, Paulie Aronson. I have 2 ICS wins, and I am Zara's friend. We have good times.
Yeah, we do have good times. Okay, Cody, your turn.
Oh God. Hey, my name's Cody Angeloff. I am a Nationals winner. I'm a YCS winner, and yeah, I also coach. I also coach on Medify. But yeah, that's just me.
Cody's a great coach. But he doesn't know anything about Purely, so he didn't help me.
True.
Okay, Patrick,
Well,
your turn.
Hey, how's it going? Patrick Hoban. I've been playing pretty much since the beginning. I took about a 4-year break, but I've won 2 YCSs, 5 ARGs, and the WCQ.
Nice. Also, what else did you do? Is there maybe something you wrote at one point?
I did write a book. It's called Road to the King.
I'm reading that right now.
Oh yeah, how do you like it?
I like it, but it's a lot to remember. I'm reading the thing about like the logical fallacies and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty long.
Wait,
Yeah,
you're
well-
reading a book while you're talking to us?
Yes.
That seems rude.
I have I'm a multitasker. Yeah, right. I have ADHD. Anyway, Shu, your turn.
Hi everyone, I'm Shimping Shu. I'm a YCS champion and then UDS champion. The only one in this call who has never qualified for Worlds at this point, I'll say. so yeah.
Okay, Steven, your turn.
I'm Steven Santoli. I'm a YCS winner from last remote, and I also qualified for Worlds. Also the Bex Exorcister and probably only Exorcist player. So
Nice. Okay, Enzo, your turn.
Hello. My name is Enzo Fialos, and I got third place at 3 YCSs. I mean, and Nationals. And I'm going to Worlds, I guess.
That's crazy.
And what's gonna happen in the Worlds, Enzo? You're not getting third this time, right?
Well, we're going to clutch up in top 4, bro, for sure.
You're getting second, because some Chinese guy's gonna win.
Thank you.
Not me.
Alright, awesome. Thank you very much. I'm Zara, I have no tops. Okay. I did get second in 200% case tourney though. Okay. How did you decide what deck to play for the playoffs and how did you prepare? Was it the same deck you played for the main event?
Polly, go.
Oh, I'm being asked. What was the question?
How did you decide what deck to play for the playoffs and how did you prepare?
So for the playoff in particular, I tried to come up with a breakdown of what because like it's a closed tournament, so you know like who's going to be in the tournament. I tried to make a breakdown of what I thought each person was going to be playing based on like what they've previously played and what I had heard or whatnot. I made like a pie chart, kind of like we do with like Top Cut for events, but I made a pie chart of like the players in the tournament, and then I built my deck like very like almost strictly based off of that pie chart of like that kind of simulated meta. So I played a very different list than I did in the main event at the WCQ, but I played cash in both. But yeah, just like built very differently because it was expected to be a little bit different meta.
Okay. Cody, your turn.
So I played the same exact list in the playoffs and the main event. I played tier limit. The main reason why I played tier in the playoffs, though, is because I thought it was going to be Swiss, like it was in Europe and South America. But whenever we got there, they told us it was single elimination, and tier is not really the best single elimination deck because you get shifted twice and you're just out. Um, if I could go back, I probably would have played cash for the playoffs and still played tier for the main event, though. But yeah, the deck was pretty good for the most part. I didn't get shifted as much as I thought in the main event, but for the playoffs, I got shifted round 1, games 2 and 3, and I just lost.
Oh, feels bad, man. Okay, Shu, your turn.
Oh, it's my turn. Well, I played this pretty much same thing as Cody. Well, because we were talking to each other, and he's copying my homework before the tournament.
Okay.
Yeah, I also.
Wait. I did not copy the homework.
Come on, you
Let's
did.
make that. I did
Alright.
not copy the homework.
You know what? Let's just say 80% of the deck was made by me at the end.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah, so we pretty much built a deck, modified it, and then tested it. Tier was the thing I've been playing since the release of the current ban list, which is after Vice's Philly. And then honestly, I didn't think as much as like Cody or Polly about the playoff. I'm just thinking bringing cash to a tournament is like you're gonna have to take 1 or 2 losses because cash is just kind of bricky and sometimes you just can't win because of certain cards. And here I just have to high roll everyone. I mean, if that's the way to win, I would just bet on it. That's what I thought. And because of that, it really I prefer to play this for the playoff and at the end for the main event. Just so it's only up to myself, not really up to my opponent if I'm playing tier. And then I will say I'm actually different than what Cody's thinking. I will still bring tier to the tournament, to the playoff, if I knew it was a single elim, because that just, in my opinion, the best deck in the format, and then or at least the best deck in my hand for the format. And I was glad I did the choice.
Okay. What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, so I got pretty lucky. I got a bunch of my friends to fly down to Florida, and we got to test for like a week straight before the event. And I mostly worked on the deck with Gabe, but Hani, Kamal, Ruben, a bunch of people were there, Taylor, and we were all just testing for like a week straight. I played Vanadium. I played it for both the playoffs and the main event. And I mean, I wouldn't have played it if I didn't think it was the best deck. I think that's probably the case for most people, right? And like when you're going first, its combos are, an auto win, as most things are. Kind of to echo the thing on cash, I didn't like the math on it. It's going to hard brick like 15% and then get bricked by like one hand trap another third of the time. So I didn't like that choice very much. And I think Vanadium was really good at also breaking boards too.
Okay, cool. Last but not least, Steven.
You also have Enzo afterwards. But
Oh, that's true. Enzo doesn't have camera, so I keep forgetting that he's there.
What do you mean
love
by
you,
me?
Enzo. I mean that in the nicest way.
yeah, so I played Exo Sister because it was just good. Like I just had 6 period time. I wasn't particularly expecting it to commit to this deck early on. I kind of just picked it up early in the format just to fiddle with it because I thought it was better than people said. But I just wanted to see how the format was going to develop before committing to anything, and then it just felt really good. It just dealt with a lot of the tech cards of the format well. Like a lot of times your interactions are back row before you have monster effects, and a lot of the back row is like go first or second cards like Booker Moon Impermanence plus return you is enough a lot of times for cash. And then if they have extenders, then you can use your monster negates. Like the talents and thrusts are usually too late in the combo or in the turn to win the game. But I just had success with the deck, so I just stuck with it for the playoffs and for the main event. I think the only thing that changed was side deck. I had more respect for Flu in the main event than I did in the playoffs, which was almost risky because there's actually a fair few Flu in the points playoff. I meant to dodge them, so that was fortunate. But other than that, I just stuck to what I thought was a good meta call in terms of dealing with the tech cards of the format.
Okay. Last but not least, Enzo.
Yeah, so I decided to play Cashier. It's like the deck I've been playing since it came out. I mean, I played the same deck for the playoff and the main event. I was just like really comfortable with it, and like for me, like the mirror match wasn't a problem because I felt that I was better than with the mirror.
Enzo's like the best cashier player. No cap.
I'm pretty sure 3 out of 6 of us in the call just didn't want to play against Enzo. Literally anyone else but just Enzo.
And not Poly for me, and I have to play Poly round 1.
I was okay with Enzo. I don't think he wanted to play me again.
I had my deck
No.
very built for the mirror, so I would have been like, I would have been okay with it. I actually really didn't want to play Shu because I was afraid to tear, and we got very that was mutual. That was mutual. We both said, and we were both like, no.
You know what's really interesting is that like pretty much all of you were like, I picked this deck because it's the best deck, but almost all of you picked completely different decks. So what's up with that?
Just all the board players.
I feel like the dominant strategy is really to try and create a deck building advantage, and then you can be wrong, 9 out of 10 times, but then the time that you're right, you just win.
I
There's
think
also a lot of different factors that go into deciding on what's the best deck. Like, for instance, like the Vanadium deck could be the best deck if you don't get hand trapped at all and you win all your die rolls. Where it's like Tier can be the best deck if you don't get shifted literally all tournament. And it's just like a lot of factors as well.
I think part of it comes down to possibly just like when you play a deck for a long time, or even for just long enough to really become comfortable with it and really like become really good with the deck, like you're naturally going to think it's the best deck because it's what you're the most familiar with. And like if you go pick up other decks to test them, you're not immediately going to know them as well as you know the deck you've been playing, so they're going to seem comparatively worse. And unless you really stick with that deck for a long time, you're probably not going to see just how good it is. So naturally, I think we all tend to be biased toward thinking the deck that we've currently been playing is the best deck, even if it isn't necessarily.
I think you should think that, though.
I did not think that about my deck. I thought my deck had a really good meta call. Like it was good into cash and into Runic decks, which I'm more uncomfortable with. But like other stuff in a more general setting, it's like I sit down against Sword Soul. It's like I'm just sweating now.
Oh, so you didn't think your deck was the best deck?
I think it was a really good call for the playoffs, just because the matchup spread. Even with Tier, I think it's actually a good matchup. Like, especially if you go first, it's just set Vadis and in a good position. But in the general vacuum, like more for the main event, no, I thought it was more that I had good coverage enough. Like it was positioned well in the metagame, and then the few bad matchups you play, it's like you just have to try just using the skill difference there. And I did feel really comfortable with the deck naturally. Like I've been playing it for the whole last list. I did like it, but there are definitely other decks that I can see people choosing over this for good reason.
That's fair.
Like even
go ahead.
Like even texting Exosister for Worlds, it's like it feels a lot worse with a weaker ban list and power level than it does for this format. Like I was just playing against all cash tier, it's like it feels great, and now I'm testing against more random stuff. It's like this feels like a lot more weakness. It still feels good, so it's still in consideration, but it's a lot worse than I thought it would be when I started testing. I thought it was kind of like, I'm just have my deck choice already for Worlds, and now I actually have to test more other things because it doesn't feel as solidified as it did for the points playoff.
He's trying to throw us off, so we don't think he's going to play Exosister.
Mind games.
I'm just kidding.
I'm convinced he will only know how to play Exosister at this point.
It's even an interesting point, though, about Cash. I think, like, just the existence of Cash in the format warped so much else in the meta. Like a lot, like, a certain type of non-engine card, like specifically like removal and board breaker cards, became so good because Cash was like particularly weak to board breakers that like the format was so different from what we've kind of come to expect. Like I feel like now that Cash is gone, we're probably going to swing back toward I would say hand traps being more popular than board breakers, at least to some extent, and also just like stuff like Exosister that like I feel like it had to be like a good matchup against Cash. Now maybe without Cash in the format, like even though like you said, even though the power ceiling of most of the decks is lower for Worlds, like maybe it just doesn't have as good of a matchup against those decks. It's interesting how Cash, like I feel like also like combo decks in general, I feel like we're gate kept for so long just by the existence of Cash in the format, just because of a Rise Heart. And I feel like hopefully combo will start coming back around like it used to be.
I think kind of the matchup spreads their games is a lot more relevant. Like if you see a lot of people talk about matchups, oh this matchup is good or this matchup is bad, and it really affects them in games. I don't think we have that happen as much in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like I think it does happen subconsciously, but a lot of people don't talk about this deck's in the format and so we can't play other stuff. Like I think Cash is a good example of like just pushing out combo decks because we haven't had one while it's been around. Just because how like effective it is for tech cards. But I think the Exorcist is kind of a good example of that, where it's not the strongest deck, but the use of tech cards versus Cash, and then it having a good engine matchup versus the second most popular deck in form of Runic is why it does well.
I think often the best deck won't care about matchups as much too, by virtue of being better than other decks. But at the same time, I think that it does depend on other things that are going on in the game. Like if Shifter's a played card, then you get points for if your deck doesn't care, for example. And so if you can build a deck that just fundamentally doesn't care about the other things, then I think you're pretty well positioned to create something that's like more powerful.
And
Just
so,
to go on that, go on.
What happened?
and so, do you have any thoughts? You haven't said anything, so I'm calling on you.
Nah. I mean, I get what they're saying.
Teacher's pointing to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It feels like one of those those classrooms where like everyone has their camera on, asking answering the teacher's questions, and it's just like, Enzo, are you awake still? This is for credit.
I'm here.
Back to Patrick's comment, it was just I think it depends on how strong the deck is. Like, there's definitely some points where the best deck is significantly better than everything else, that the matchup spread's somewhat irrelevant. But there are then weaker, like tier 1 decks where it can definitely be punished by being targeted, and it almost depends on the versing the format for it even to remain the best deck.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think what I was saying isn't possible in every format. But I think that if you're like coming into like building a deck and like choosing it for an event, that's at least what I'd want to start with. And if it doesn't work out, then you move on to like things like matchups at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I think Purely's the best deck because it's cute. Alright, next question.
That's one way to think about it.
Also, it's a good deck, okay? It's an excellent deck. Like, Konami hitting Delicious was, like, correct, because otherwise Purely would be the best deck out of all your guys' decks. Purely is better. So, yeah. Okay, anyway.
Honey's hearing at his camera right now, hearing that.
That's fair. Well, what's up? How did the playoffs compare to other tournaments you've done? Was it really the hardest tournament you've done? Or were y'all facing a bunch of scrubs?
Definitely not that. I feel like if you went through the list of like names who were qualified from like the old 16 and this year's 16, like it pretty strongly correlated with like if you had to handpick the best 32 players, like maybe not every like a perfect correlation, but like there was a pretty strong correlation. It was I think it was a really strong bracket.
Funny enough, from like this, like the call that we're in, I think I was the only one that's ever been in the playoffs before out of everyone here. So like, I actually wanted to understand like how you guys like approached it and like pretty much like what you guys thought about it, and like did it actually live up to your expectations, or like was it like a letdown pretty much?
I feel this one is still special because, like, the one you had few years before, when I was preparing it with you, it was only 16 people, so it was like a lot smaller, a lot easier to kind of even almost anti-pick other people because the pool is a lot smaller. but this year was like 32, and how the format kind of diverse. It's quite hard to even prepare for it. Like you might just prepare for really one side of the tournament and didn't roll well enough and got to pair into the other side and completely just missed on the strategy prepare and was just costing the tournament. So because this year it's like 32, I will say it's just like a completely unique um, environment. I don't know. It's at the end I was just thinking, yeah, I just don't think about it. Just prepare for myself. That's my strategy at the end.
I think I was pretty on par with what I thought. Yeah, you're playing probably a YTS champion every round, but at the end of the day, you only need to win 4 rounds compared to like a YTS where you need to like win 16. And so there's definitely trade-offs. Like it's a lot shorter of a tournament, but the competition is better.
I just try to focus. I mean, I think for preparation, I obviously took a lot of time to kind of scout, like Paulie said, and try to figure out what people are on. But once the gameplay kind of, I just don't want to focus on other people. It's like, you're playing competent players, you respect them, but beyond that, just focus on the gameplay, and that's it. And I think that we have a really strong competition in that thing, but I think we're all part of the strong competition as well. So there's no reason to psych ourselves out. Like I don't think there's any real clear favorites going in that were like, oh my god, like this person's so much better than anyone else. So you're just playing against people of similar skill, even if they are also really good. So you can just focus on your own game and not psych yourself out as a result.
I probably played just as many champions in the main event.
Yeah.
Well, if you factor in the fact there were only 4 rounds, I suppose maybe by virtue of that, because I feel like in most sense, I feel like if you go far in Top Cut, maybe, but I feel like definitely just from Swiss, you probably aren't facing that many like players that strong.
Yeah, I feel like if you get to like top 16, it would eventually like be equivalent, but until then, I don't know. I feel like still, even at like that, it feels like I just had 3 rounds. Like I like probably like 6 or 7 just free rounds because I just knew that I was better than my opponent just from like how they were playing and how I was playing and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's the
I mean,
key.
for me,
You
the
think you're
playoff.
better than them.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Enzo.
For me, the playoff, it could go like 2 ways for like different people. Like some people could get like really stressed because it's not like the same thing as the YCS, right? It's like a one-time opportunity to go to Worlds, So like people get like really stressed about it, and like some people just want to make the correct choice because like they want to go to Worlds, so they'll just be like really stressed the entire like weekend or the week or like in the tournament. And like for me, I wasn't really stressed because like I already knew what I was gonna play, and I was like really comfortable with my pick, so there was like no stress for me. But you can like see there's like a lot of tension between like players and other people. Like even like the day leading to the tournament, like on Friday, like everybody was just stressed out, and then like after the tournament, like after the playoff, everybody was like just stress relieved because like it was just over.
Okay. We have some questions from Twitter. How much dedication does it take to become a top duelist or near your guys' level?
Say the magic line, Polly.
What?
Say the magic line.
Nope. Practice as much as you can. It just takes a lot of practice and time investment, and it's like time in, results out. That's how I look at it. We're not giving
so
up.
for me, I used to play like a ton. But then, I stopped playing altogether for 4 years, came back with no idea what was going on. And now I don't play very much in between events. Like I'm just busy doing work. And so I don't have like a lot of time in between events. And so I've mostly been going to events without a lot of great playtesting, which was why Nats was cool because I actually got to playtest for like a full week before the event. But I think, and so now I've been doing like okay. Like since I came back, I think I've topped like 5 events, but I haven't won any yet. So I'm like doing okay. So I think ultimately you get out what you put in, and so like I'm not putting in as much right now, so it makes sense, I think. Um, but by the same token, it's not like I'm doing bad, but I think I still have like the fundamentals from when I did put in infinite hours too.
I think that I agree that obviously you get more reward the more time you put in. But just as a thing to kind of maybe some players who want to get better want to hear is that if you focus on improving fundamentals, it doesn't mean you have to put the same amount in every format, because you may grind super hard for a format and not have the results you want. Or even if you do it, then you think to yourself, "Oh, do I need to grind that hard every format?" And so I think if you kind of focus on more fundamentals deciding or figuring out a play style you really like I really enjoy mid-range decks. I just immediately trying to shy away from combo, and then that leaves my deck choices a lot easier. Or just having a better idea of like how to approach the meta, and whatever way, like whatever fundamentals you're learning. I think once you kind of get those down, then it's a lot easier to jump into a format, put in a decent amount of practice, and then feel really ready for it. As opposed to like having to look at each format as you're reinventing the wheel and put an absurd amount of time into it to get good at it.
I feel like that the quality testing that you put in matters a lot, because you can put in 24 hours and someone else could put in like 2 hours, but if they're actually testing correctly and focusing on the right things, then the 2 hours is going to be more beneficial than the 24 hours as well, which is like a huge thing. But most of the time, it's a lot of people's like play testing groups too. That's like a big thing from what I've seen and from what I've noticed is like you'll be playtesting with people that play the game like semi-competitively. Like they'll go to like 1 out of 2 regionals or so that are in the area, and they won't fly to events, where you will actually like go to events and want to like do better. And usually if you're stuck in like that type of play group, then you'll just get dragged down and your skills won't be improving as fast as they probably should, as if you were in a better testing group.
On that note, like, what makes testing more valuable? Also, can you put on headphones, because I can hear myself?
That's fine with me then.
Yeah, so, what makes testing more quality? Like, especially for people who have limited time, like, how can you maximize your testing?
I think you should test with hands face up.
That's a good way, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Having both
'Cause then-
hands face up and then talking through plays.
Yeah.
definitely talking through plays. A big mistake I think a lot of players make when they test is like, especially like I feel like more like semi-competitive players. Some people feel very strongly about like no takebacks, right? Like you're playing like you're almost if they're playing to win while they're supposed to be testing. Definitely don't worry about like the goal is not to win in testing. The goal is not even to like like outplay your opponent. The goal is testing should be collaborative. That's I think the key word. It should be collaborative. You want the goal is to help each other. If you see a play that your opponent could do or that your friend, your testing partner could do, or a play that maybe one of you made a mistake a couple phases ago, or a couple moves ago, and you see like, oh well, you know what? If you had done this, like this wouldn't happen. You should have done this to prevent this. Like go back, fix it, fix the line. Like try different lines, right? Go back, like try different options, reverse the game state, like try something different. Don't look at it as like a game being played to win. Like explore all the options and play collaboratively.
I think you also need to be playing against standard decks. Like if you're working on something that is different than what's being played, then you don't need to play it against something else that's different. You should play it against like the most represented decks and the standard versions of them.
That's a great point. Like, yeah. Like personally myself, even just recently testing for Worlds, me and some of my friends, we've been testing a lot of like the same type of decks, and almost ended up in like sort of like an echo chamber thing, where the non-engine we were picking to play was very tailored to like mirrors of what we've been playing almost. And then in discussions with other players, it was like, oh wait, like no one else is like other people are playing different things. Like this might not be the right non-engine to play. Like you don't, like Pat said, like test against like the standard deck so that you don't fall into like making wrong deck choices based on anticipating seeing things that like you're playing but no one else is playing.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up too, Polly, because like whenever I went to Worlds, like whenever I was like testing for like Worlds, a lot of the things that I was expecting to see, I just never saw. Like even like tag choices, deck choices and stuff like that. Like I just never saw it. So like I was playing with less cards in my side deck pretty much, or like I was playing with deck cards in my main deck. So like being able to like actually like pretty much just figure out like the majority of what people would be playing, what the best decks are as a margin, rather than what you think the best decks are, is very important.
Great point.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I think that people have a tendency to think that whatever the best deck at the time is overrepresented. Like I think people often think they're going to play against something like 6, 7 rounds just because it won the last event or won the last 2 events even. And I think that's often not the case. Like there are exceptions, there are formats where it is. But I do think they are more exceptions. I'd be curious to know how many in the main event, just even in Swiss, how many like Cash Tira players did you guys play against?
2? I think
1
2.
for me.
0.
I played like 4.
So we had
Wait,
0
like-
on the low end, 4 on the high
But,
end.
like-
It seems like about 2 is the
I
average.
played like 8 beers.
Oh,
I
whoa.
Oh,
Yo,
dang.
Yeah,
how
you can have events
how
like
did you
that too.
play?
But I think, like, if you're gonna prepare
I'm guessing you are.
for an event, I think it makes sense that if Cash is the most represented deck in a format like this, to come in thinking that in Swiss you might play like 2 or 3, not 6 or 7.
I was expecting 3 to 4, personally.
Back to the testing part. I think another thing to do is when you're testing is not to have result oriented thinking about some games you lose. So if you're looking at a game and you're playing Cash and you're like, okay, I can play around nib or I can push for game and then lose the nib, and then you lose the nib, I don't think it's necessarily that you should look at this game and go, oh, I should have played around nib because I lost to it. You can look at it and go, okay, if I did a conservative play, I lose to all these other tech cards because I'm giving him another turn, and say, okay, well, it's correct to lose a nib and push into it, and then he had it and he lost. So I think that you're using test games because you're only getting a small sample size test games. You're using that small sample size to get an idea of how the cards are interacting or whatever, and then you have to draw conclusions from that. So it's not just, oh, I lost this card, therefore I have to play around it. It's okay, how often should I be playing around this card because of its popularity, and then how much it affects my deck and whatnot. So it's just having not getting too scarred by your losses.
Another thing to add on about that as well is that say you did lose the end of that game, maybe like try to rewind, see if there's a better line that you could have taken as well to maybe not lose to it as hard while still achieving game on board.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I kind of started playing during like COVID, and like my first like events were like after COVID, like the Charlotte. Like for me, testing was just like all dueling book. Like that's all I did, like 24/7. Like I just played like a lot of dueling book, and that's how like I got better. And I mean, like I recommend a lot of people to play dueling book. I know like sometimes like rated or like anything like that, like it could get like really annoying. But, I mean, like that's just how it is, right? Like you just gotta like not get frustrated. Just play.
Dueling Book has some
Also-
advantages that even like the best testing circles as like a small group don't have. Like, Hani plays a ton of Dueling Book, and he was like coaching how this Cyber Dragon guy should play his deck, and it was just funny that he knew that, and it's because he plays so much Dueling Book. Whereas like me, I'd never know that.
Dueling Book
Mhm.
is. I'm 100% with Enzo. I'm like one of the biggest advocates of Dueling Book. Like I consider Dueling Book a uniquely like invaluable tool for like competitive play. None of the other simulators come close to it. Like even like Pat said, IRL play. Like me just having access to the entire card pool instantly, like being able to test whatever you want like instantaneously, and like do as many reps as you want. Like just with a click of a button, like it's so efficient and it's so valuable. I'm a huge like Pat said, me and Hani play all the time. Like I think we play the most Dueling Book of like probably not of anybody, but like a lot. And it's I don't know. I play I actually stopped going to locals probably over a year ago. I think I only went to locals like 6 times last year, just because I consider if I put 4 hours to locals, let's say, versus putting 4 hours, just playing 4 hours of Dueling Book is going to be so much more advantageous in terms of getting good testing and, preparing for an event. I end up usually always choosing the latter. Although local is obviously valuable for sort of different reasons, because the social aspect, but it's a trade-off. But yeah.
Another thing about Dueling Book as well. Another thing about Dueling Book as well is that it's a lot faster as well, because since it's all simulated, you can easily just play with screen share on Discord. So the same way that you would be able to in real life. But you can also, for instance, say that no one in your group has access to a very, very random card that came out 10 years ago and it's in bulk. Rather than spending 3 hours finding it, you can just add it to your deck and then see how it performs, how it doesn't perform, and all of that, and actually get a lot more quality time in.
I still ultimately prefer testing in real life, but I think it's probably mostly because of the dynamics that come with it. Specifically, I think it's easy to have a lot of people, your entire testing circle, 10 people or whatever, watching the one game, making comments on everything, and I think sometimes that can be less productive than if you just had, you, the opponent, and maybe one other person there. And I think you can control that on Discord and, on Dueling Book in general, but online it feels like the tendency is more to not do that. And so I still prefer testing in real life, but there's definitely a lot of value in Dueling Book.
Yeah, I definitely prefer. Sorry, I prefer in-person testing. I think the main thing is, as long as you're getting efficient testing of some form, Dueling Book's obviously a completely reasonable way of testing, and it's super good. And like I said, it's really good for if you want to get a lot of reps in and learn your deck. So if you're making a lot of mechanical misplays, then Dueling Book's great. If you're suffering more from anxiety in terms of you start tilting yourself at larger tourneys, you get stressed with who you're playing, then I would recommend more in-person testing. And I'm someone who definitely leaves more in-person testing. I just feel it's a easier way of avoiding burnout. And a lot of discussions I have anyways. I'll watch a lot of games, a lot of discussions I find are more this come more naturally in person. You get a larger group of people you're talking to, as opposed to just your tests grouping echo. So I think there are merits of both. But yeah, I'm definitely lower on the Dueling Book grinders than some other people in this call right now.
You made a great point though. There are 100% elements that go into IRL play, a tournament, like you said, anxiety, fatigue, burnout, just physically sitting down, and the mental aspect of facing an opponent that you can't recreate with Dueling Book. So there are elements that Dueling Book can't recreate. And also, like Pat said, I 100% agree. Regardless of whether you're playing on DB or in person, I think 2 to 3, maybe 4, probably 3 is definitely the ideal number of people to be working with during testing. I think when you get more than that, it definitely becomes counterproductive. That's an issue. I hate when you get a call with 8 people all talking at the same time, and it's just you can't get good quality testing when you're doing that.
I feel like I kind of just do everything differently than everyone. Well, first of all, as someone who born in the OCG community, it's Dueling Book is it's not a fun place for me. It's definitely not as automated as I need it, since I'm more familiar with other more automated dueling system like Omega or Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro. And then for me, I mean, honestly, I don't even play those as much. My testing, I be honest, I don't test as much as I should, not as much as I guess everyone else in the call. For me, usually my test session just go to a big tournament and actual play and figure out there. That's why World Grind for me was actually just not even a grind, because I just constantly going to nearby regionals, or in the weekends that there wasn't regionals, going to case tournaments, console tournaments, those big ones that people actually cares and people actually want to win during the tournament, and those are actually more my playtesting session. And then based on the results from those actual tournaments, reflecting into builds, the tech card strategies, or just the whole deck, or even a different deck of the format, and then see how it goes. So yeah, to be honest, I don't even test as much. In fact,
I mean, exact same. At least
Yeah.
since I've come back, I used to test more.
Yeah, I usually just rely on my theory now rather than testing.
I think that a lot of the purpose of testing is to create shortcuts so that you're not like figuring things out within the tournament, and that more so you're just like deciding between a couple of shortcuts that you already have.
Yeah.
I think
to
I
be
guess I'm
fair-
the main. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Zara.
I just want to make a comment because, like, for Nats, I did pretty much all my testing on Dueling Book. I went to locals like twice or something. And then I struggled at Nats because I wasn't paying attention to stuff like time. Like, I wasn't like paying attention to stuff like, the opponent's cues, and I was having a lot of anxiety too. And so I think like Steven had a good point about how like in person is really important too, especially if you're kind of starting out, so you can get over those type of barriers.
That's a good point about like time in particular too. I was gonna say I feel like I'm probably the main like grinder like who like tests so much in this call, and I have the same issue that Zara just mentioned. I actually a lot of times like in person like because I play so much on DB, I'll like lose to time sometimes because I wasn't paying attention to the clock. That happened to me once like a month ago, and I was like, damn. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay. Let's see. Thoughts on the health of the game, what pain points the game has, and what changes you think would benefit the life of the game. So basically, like, I don't know if you guys saw, but some stakeholders met with the OCD people and had some complaints about, like, the health of the game and Master Duel and stuff like that. So there's, like, a big discussion on, like, how do we get new players into the game? Is the game becoming too complicated? How do you convert Master Duel people into TCG players? Stuff like that.
One thing that I think should be like if you look at the prize pool for Yu-Gi-Oh compared to some other games, it's definitely worse. And the fact that we have as big attendances as we do with a prize pool that is perhaps not as great as some people would want, I think is a testament that the game's at least doing something right. And then in terms of trying to get new players and Master Duel players over, I mean, I think that's more of a complicated question. I think I think Master Duel helped a lot. I think that older formats getting kind of booming is bringing some people back too, because I'm pretty active in the Edison community, and a lot of people I talk to at events are like, oh yeah, I want to pick up current again. So that's a big direction. But I think that overall, I really dislike seeing these kind of doomsayer posts about like, oh, this thing like it was ruining the game or whatever. Because I like there's very few formats, especially of recent. Like I think this last year was really good for in terms of gameplay. Like you had a lot of degenerate stuff, but a lot of the degenerate stuff had very clear answers. And you had ways of deck building to beat it. And I think a lot of people, when they sit down and play against something degenerate, the big thing that they're missing is that it has outplays. It's just the outplaying needs to be done in deck building as opposed to gameplay. So if you're sitting down in a tourney where there's a bunch of Mystic Mine running around and you just get mined and you lose, it's like, well, yes, that card's a bit overpowered and you don't have much outplay to it. But if you then build your deck, have a better just choice, or you have better tech cards to deal with it, then you're going to get rewarded in the long run for have answers to some of these types of cards. And I know that when I pick my deck, I usually try to avoid decks that have a silver bullet that, it's just I have no action of, like, no real way of playing around this card just to, give myself a chance against these type of floodgate cards. And not everyone has to do that. Like, there's other things to do, but a lot of people just don't spend time focusing on the deck building.
One caveat to that is, yes, I agree entirely. With the one caveat being for played cards. I'm completely okay with entering an event, and even if there is a very good out, like for example in Samurai, I was playing the Gimmick Puppet Lock. Droplets was an amazing out, but because Rise Heart's the best card in the game, no one's playing Droplets. So I'm okay if entering with a silver bullet if I'm making a conscious choice that the thing that beats it is just not represented very much.
I think
Also,
it was more.
overall, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say on the overall health of the game, I think Konami is actually very intentional when the degenerate strategies come out, whether it's floodgates or just anything overpowered. At its core, I think it's a player retention strategy because there are more casual players than there are competitive players. And if the competitive players win every time, why would the casual players keep playing? And so I think the reason that we even have floodgates so much in the game and it is very intentional. And I think you see that reflected in the attendance. Like attendance is bigger than it's ever been. And I think it's a good business decision for Konami in a way, even though I, as a player, hate it.
Right. I think Pat's. Yeah, I agree. Like I think just and to clarify, I think Pat, you're specifically talking about floodgate cards that like don't necessarily have much interaction, but can make a big swing in the game, and therefore give maybe less competitive players a chance of like to win some percentage of their games. Cards that we don't like those cards because we want all of our games to be determined by skill and the better player. But I think you're saying Konami intentionally allows for cards like that to somewhat exist so that some percentage of games do go to so that a less competitive player can still win some games. And I agree. I think that is intentional on Konami's part. And it makes sense for.
I think it's a core value. They want anyone to be able to win.
Yeah, there has to be some balance, like you said, between between skill and luck. There has to be a balance to give everyone a chance of winning some percentage of games.
I love Flippingos, and I'm just going to say that. No, I mean that card should obviously be gone, but yeah, the existence of them, I don't think ruins the game.
It's only one of 100.
I mean, honestly, as like a competitive player, like I would prefer it to be like no more than 3 decks in a format, but I know that it would kill just like the casual base. Like locals would not like really be happy with it. But then again, I feel like there are also like different types of like solutions to it, where some locals have been doing what's the format called whenever they have been like meta stuff? Hard the Underdog?
Yeah, Harder the Underdog.
Yeah, I feel like if that were to see more popularity, then it would give the casual and the competitive players a lot more relief, I guess, because the competitive players can get what they want because most of the competitive players, I would assume, would want no more than 3 decks in a format. Whereas, like, every format since tier, there's been at least, like, 20 decks that you could go up against at a YCS or even Nationals. And, like, I think it's better now than it was in previous formats because a lot of the side deck cards overlap into different matchups, even if you're not expecting them, just because of how powerful the cards have become, like Lightning Storm, Feather Duster, Raigeki, all these types of cards. They overlap into other matchups, but I don't know. I don't want to play because at Nats I played against in my 12 rounds of Swiss I played against 10 different decks, like 10 or 11 different decks. And I feel like for a national level, like that should just never happen, And like they are all pretty different for the most part, and I don't know. It kind of kills the game for me to an extent. But like as a competitive player, like you're going to play the format no matter what. So I feel like that's the way of Konami's like kind of dealing with it because the competitive players are still going to play no matter what the format is anyway.
I don't even necessarily. So I would make not necessarily a counterpoint, but I don't necessarily even think that that much diversity of decks like that is actually necessarily a bad thing from a competitive standpoint. I think it can. So like, I understand what Cody's getting at is like in general, traditionally a lot of competitive players have disliked when there's too much diversity in a format because it makes it very difficult from a deck building perspective because you can only side deck, you only have 15 side deck spots, you can only side deck for so many things. So at that point, like it kind of just becomes variance. Like, are you going to play the thing you prepared for or not? You can't prepare for everything. But I think as maybe a counterpoint, I feel like the game's really at a skillful point where like if you like. It doesn't really matter if there's 15 different decks. If you've practiced every single one of those matchups extensively to know all the interactions, you don't need to have your side built for every single deck. Like you can, for the most part, outplay really whatever deck they're playing. Like, so again, which kind of goes back to my whole thing of like, I feel like the Mario game is just about like, if you put the time in and you know all those matchups, you can still consistently do pretty well. Like regardless of how your deck is built. Well, not regardless, but even if you don't necessarily have, let's say, like a hard side card for every single matchup.
Oh no, I feel like the game. Sorry, I feel like the game is more so like. Yes, you can like prepare for it, but it's more or so like the skill is more in the deck building now rather than technical play.
I disagree.
And really, you disagree with that?
I think as the years have gone by, the game has become far more dependent on technical play than it was, and less on deck building than it was at any point in the past 10 years.
There's no way. There's absolutely no way, unless it was like, unless you're referring to tier format where technical play was like the most important it's been.
Well, yeah, I agree on that. But
I think Polly's right. And you know why? Because if you look at Top Cut and you see people with the same deck, they all have different lists, but they all top. That means that deck list doesn't matter that much. It's technical play. Stu's like, oh my god.
I think both are important. But sorry, I go on, Pat.
No worries. Both are important. And the thing about deck building is, for any given format, it's never possible. And when it's not possible, the only thing you really can fall back on is technical play. And if you're in a one deck format, it's a one deck format for a reason. It's because, it's figured out. It is the best thing. And so those often end up being technical play formats. And then I think then you have the 3 or 4 deck formats, and then you have the very many deck formats like we're in now. And those, it kind of depends. Why are there a lot of decks? So there are a lot of decks because they're really powerful going second cards, that can make it so that anybody can win, like Lightning Storm, like you said, Cody. Or are there a bunch of decks because none of them are that good? Because if they were, then, it would be more played. And so at least the optimist in me sees the possibility to be able to innovate in those formats because they clearly aren't figured out.
I happen to prefer the more diverse. I should say I prefer the more diverse formats because I really enjoyed Sprite Tier. But I kind of agree with Paulie in the sense that as long as you're prepared for decks, it's a good thing. I think there's a problem when you have too many decks and the decks are all doing degenerate stuff. So I think last Nats format was a lot worse than this Nats format. Like last Nats, both of them were very diverse. The last Nats, there's people were scythe locking, then you play against Flunder and they just statue lock you, and then you just have people set 5. So a lot of people were doing different, and mine was also a card. So a lot of people were doing very different things that you didn't have the ability to outplay through just technical play because of the nature of the cards in the game. And then that format felt worse. Where if you look at this format, there's not as much degenerate stuff. Obviously, there's still a bunch of stuff, but Kashtira's end board isn't particularly degenerate. I think with Runic Sprite decks, you can gas through with just kind of standard tech cards. And so having a diverse format like the one we have now, I think is fine because you're not you're still able to play the game, and you're forced into a position where yes, your technical play matters, and because maybe you're having to line up perfectly, but you're still being allowed to play the game. And not getting punished for a lack of a side deck. So I think I think these types of formats are fine. Or if you go to last stats format, those are the ones that are more problematic.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree with that. If it's a diverse format, if it's like how I was saying there could be 15 decks and you can just still potentially outplay all of them. If it's 15 decks and like Steven said, if all 15 of those decks are each doing something that if it resolves turn 1, there was no counterplay, there's nothing you'll be able to do, you lose the game. Then yes, obviously you can't outplay that, and then I agree. That's a problem when it's diverse, when there's a huge diversity of decks and they're all doing degenerate things. That's I agree. I think so. Maybe it's just I think at the current point in time, I think Konami's done a pretty good job of balancing most of the decks to where it's not like that. But there's definitely still some, for sure.
I think it's definitely better than a year ago when we were just scything each other.
You think it's what?
Definitely better than a year ago.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly, this year's format has been pretty great. We had quite different formats. We started with a 2-deck format with Tier and Sprite, into a Tier 0 format with just one deck, then fall into almost a triangle format afterwards with Cash, Branded Labyrinths, and then into Nats with just everything. honestly, for me particularly, I wouldn't say I dislike any of the format. I think they're all okay. It just takes different strategy to figure out the answer. And I particularly just enjoy the way the process of finding out the answer.
Yeah, no, I like the cycles. I kind of like all of them, but specifically, I think I like all of them at the beginning of the format and kind of dislike all of them towards the end of the format. Because once it's solved, and like without new cards coming out or a ban list that changes the dynamics, once it's solved, people are playing it because it's good.
I also think
mentioning
that I think diverse formats are decent because if you're someone who likes testing a lot of lower tier stuff, like myself, and even if I end up choosing not to, like at the beginning of most formats, I'll test some jank decks I think might be decent, and most of the time it's okay. I'm just gonna play like one of the top 3 decks, but every once in a while you find something that you actually think's decent, and then stick to it. And I think that's really rewarding and kind of where a lot of people take some fun from. So I think having those formats occasionally is good. It's kind of nice that we've kind of had this rotation through where we've had triangle format that, like you said, tier 0, and then to diverse format. So everyone throughout the last year has had a point where they probably liked. So no one's happy throughout. Well, I mean, some people may be happy throughout all of it, but I think most people have been at least happy throughout some of it.
I mean, mentioning the ban list, I feel like the ban list has been the thing that's changing formats the most instead of even sets releasing. And then, honestly, I feel like just for TCG specifically, if Konami TCG can really give us like more clear dates on ban lists or just more frequent ban lists, I will prefer that instead. I feel like that will be a healthier way for TCG at least. Because one of my current big issues is just going to an event and knowing if there's gonna be a ban list right before.
Yeah.
I disagree. I think sets are more impactful than lists. Because like at the end of the day, lists are primarily restrictive, where they're mostly taking away things, and sometimes that can make other things better, but it was options you already had, whereas sets coming out is just like entirely new options, and so I think at least I find that to be more impactful.
I mean, they definitely both have their pros and their cons, but I don't know. It really depends on how long the first event is after each of those things, though. I feel like, because like I said, they both have their pros and cons, but like at the end of the day, they do generally the same thing where they warp the format in their own way, and whoever like is better like strategically like building decks, solving formats fast, and figuring out what the correct answers will usually do the best there.
Yeah, I think the first and second events of any format are the most winnable.
I agree.
I go back and forth. Sometimes I think the second event is actually the most winnable, though.
It really depends on how long after like each event, and how much prep time, and how much time you can actually spend like preparing for the event. I feel like that's like the biggest thing, because if you only have like 1 or 2 weeks before, like, then it's really, really hard to find like the best deck to say, like,
which is
for
often
that
the
event.
case within the last like year or so. It's usually been like new set comes out, YCS a week later.
Yeah, it was like that for 3 or 4 different YCSs actually, because it was like that with the Shizu cards. It was like that for
It was actually a roll.
tier cards.
It was Darkling Blast first, and then Shizu.
Yeah, Shizu.
Yeah, that's one.
And then Hypernova, the one we three had for Mexico, and then straight into Vegas.
And then the list,
and there was a list.
And the list.
Yeah. We played the first event of the format twice in a row.
It was, I don't know. I don't really like it whenever that happens with such short time, but if there's enough time to prep for it, I actually prefer like the beginning of formats.
I think it also depends how much you can look on the OCG of things. So if it sets releasing, we have a much better idea what's going to be good. Where if we get this ban list where we get different hits from the OCG, now we're really reinventing the wheel, because we don't have anything to base it on. We don't know what decks are good. Maybe some decks have been hit harder than we expected or not hard enough. And so those kind of lists or events that follow those types of lists are really panicky. Where if it's a more spectacle or if it's a set release, then I think those are a bit more manageable to play events like immediately after those.
I rarely look at what OCG is doing from like a metagame perspective. They are pretty different. I think when it's probably the most useful is when you're coming into like the first event of the format and you're trying to figure out what the standard will be. I think, people will default to copying the OCG, so I think it can be helpful in that respect. But I don't pay it much attention in terms of what I think is the best deck.
No, funny.
It's because we have such different play styles as well. Like the OCG generally doesn't like that much combo. They usually it's also because of Maxi and stuff too, and like because the lists are just so much different, so it really like gatekeeps a lot of decks as well.
What do you guys
Funny
think
to
about
say.
Maxi?
Maxi is weird.
It should be banned.
Yeah.
Funny to
Man.
say, kind of opposite to Pat. I'm someone who like pay attention to OCG quite much, and then based on what my observations, OCG's ban list usually like to just hit consistency and doesn't like change how the deck works. It just make it less often working. And therefore, actually, fun fact, you can actually predict a lot of the TCG hits by just looking at OCG ban lists. Because like often it would just be similar thing as Konami sometimes just don't even know what to do and they just copy each other. And then that's actually one way to like almost quote unquote preparing for a ban list. The issue for TCG is just we don't know when is the ban list. Like most of us probably have good idea of what's gonna be the balance, but we don't know when will be the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it almost feels like it doesn't matter until it happens.
Yeah.
To an extent too, because like if it's not relevant for the next event, I don't care at least until it is.
I look at it that way too. Yeah, like I don't people. I get asked a lot. Like whenever new, I feel like more casual players are always very very keen on like the new announcements of like new card releases when new stuff gets announced to the OCG. I always get asked like, oh, what do you think of like such and such upcoming archetype or upcoming card? And like to me, I very rarely look ahead at anything kind of past the next event, like you said, Pat. But definitely, certainly not anything that's going to be coming out more than let's say 2 or 3 weeks from the present. So it's always funny how so a lot of times my more casual friends help me by informing me about what's coming ahead.
Same.
Alrighty. Well, we're coming close to time. So before we end, I did have a question from chat for Polly. If you're ready for it.
Oh,
it's a
sure,
very
of course.
Poignant question. Okay, where do you
bet I
get
know
your
exactly
cool
what it is.
shirts?
My what?
Where do you get your cool shirts?
Oh, H&M and Express.
Nice. Okay. And the last question is, I don't want explanation. I just want to hear yes or no. Okay. Mystic Mind, unban, yes, or don't unban, no?
No, I think
No.
we're all on agreement on no.
No.
Yeah.
Enzo?
No.
You could ask something more obvious. Like if you asking Max C, we might have different answers, right? If you're asking Mr. Mind, I think everyone's gonna take that.
No, man, at NASA, I was hanging out with people, and they were like, God, I miss Mystic Mind. And I was like, don't say that. Konami might hear you.
Yeah, of course they were playing Sky Striker.
They were playing side events. That's what they were doing.
All right. So, how do we find you? Go ahead and plug yourself. If you're a coach, let us know. If you have a Twitter or whatever, let us know. Polly?
I mainly use Facebook and Twitter. Paul Aronson on both. I do coaching. Right now I'm taking a pause until after Worlds to focus on the event. But I do coaching and Twitter and Facebook.
Cody?
Yep. I do coaching at metafy.gg/@CodyAngeloff. I'm usually free pretty much all week. and I'm very flexible with times. So if you're trying to improve your game, maybe burst the bubble or something, maybe check me out.
Okay, Patrick.
I don't do coaching. Catch me at YCSs.
Shoot.
You can find me on Facebook or maybe just Discord. I can do coach. No, I don't do as much as the others. But if you want to find Polly and he's busy, or you don't like Cody, you can come to me.
Steven?
Yeah, you'll just find me at events. I'm not doing anything else in terms of social media at the moment.
Enzo?
He doesn't even have Facebook. I couldn't even find him.
I need to hide from everyone.
Yeah, for me, it's just my Facebook account to go together, just the Fialos, and yeah, just you'll see me at events. That's it.
Yeah, be sure to get everyone's autograph. They're all famous people. Except maybe Shu. Just kidding.
Whoa, that was
Damn.
Well,
At least he has a
really
working
not
face
good-
cam.
Damn. Maybe I need to get to Worlds next year to be good enough to beat you.
Yeah, we'll invite you back. Okay, thank you everyone. Please like, comment, subscribe. Podcast every Monday. I have a Patreon where this stuff goes out immediately afterwards instead of like whenever I remember to upload. Thank you very much. Bye bye.